Matt, hello. You are up next, sir. Matt.
Hey, how's it going, Bart? Can you
Pretty
hear me?
good. Yep, pretty good. Yep, I can hear you.
All right, great. So I have a hand from 2-5 at Rivers Casino in Des Plaines, which is just outside of Chicago, Illinois.
What is it called? Rivers what?
Rivers, it's just Rivers Casino. It's just called Rivers Des Plaines because it's in the town Des Plaines,
Is
which is
this
right
new?
outside.
Is this new?
Yeah, it's new. So it's the same company that has Rivers out east,
Yeah.
but they just opened a poker room earlier this year,
Oh.
which is really nice because the Horseshoe in Hammond, Indiana,
I
where
was just gonna say, I know
I
there's
would
a
usually
horseshoe in
play.
Hammond, right? Yeah.
Yeah, so they kind of closed their poker room a little bit. They put it up in the venue and they have less tables and they aren't open 24 hours a day. It just sucks now, basically. It used to be a great room.
Oh.
Now it's terrible, and Rivers kind of has picked up the slack. And just on a personal note, it's much nicer
Hmm.
and closer to home.
How
So
far is it from Chicago? So it's closer to Chicago than what?
yeah, it's right outside the city limits. It's right next to O'Hare Airport.
So is it in Indiana though?
No, this one is in Illinois,
Oh, okay.
whereas
I didn't even
Hammond
know that
was in
that was
Indiana.
legal in
Yeah.
Illinois now.
Yep.
Well, I
Yep.
guess they have sports betting there now too. Oh, okay.
Yeah, yeah, and there's a
Yeah.
nice sports booking
Interesting.
or
Oh,
sports book there too.
pretty rare that I don't know of a poker room around the country, but okay.
Right, it is new. It's like a
Yeah.
couple few maybe 3-4 months old. So
Okay. All right. So two
yeah,
five,
so
and
this is two
What's the
five
buy-in?
thousand. Yeah, two 5,000 cap,
Mm-hmm.
and this is my first hand that I play. I sat down like a few hands prior, so I had 1,000 and was covered by the villain in the hand.
Okay.
So pre-flop, I raised to $20 from under the gun one. Middle position calls, and the cutoff, who's like maybe a mid 30-year-old guy, three bets to $80.
What do you have, by the way?
Ace queen of spades.
Okay, so here from plus one makes it 20, which sounds to me like it's probably the standard open size, right?
Yeah,
Ace
that's a
queen,
standard.
ace queen of spades to 20. MP1 calls, cut off three bets to 80. Okay.
Yep. And I call, and middle position folds.
So you are 1,000 effective.
Yes.
So, I mean, with a dead caller in the middle, you can do some four betting here. Obviously, you're incentivized to four bet to get that guy out of the hand. But I think calling here is fine. You know, going back to a little bit of sort of older school thought that it's a little bit easier to play a suited hand multi-way. All these hold'em hands, though, still sort of incentivized to being played heads up because if you call and the guy in the middle calls, it's very hard for you to realize your equity. So you could
Yep.
certainly play a four bet here. What would you have done with ace queen offsuit? Just curious.
Yeah, that's what I was just going to say is ace queen off. I think I would four bet. I even considered four betting this, but just sat down and kind of wanted to get a feel for the table and suited. I was comfortable if the guy behind called. I thought it would play well enough that I wasn't minding it too much if it went multi-way.
I'm going to give you a little sort of hack, though. I mean, here's the thing. Like, at deeper stacks, that's more of a sort of a shallower tournament thought. And I remember there's a piece of content in our catalog, Why Suited Hands Are Better. You're supposed to four bet the better hands to structure correctly. So ace queen suited probably should be four bet more than ace queen offsuit here. And I mean, I might even consider folding ace queen off, but that's something that I've heard a fair amount of people say, well, I'd four bet the offsuit variety or whatever. And I don't really know where that comes from. Because if you're trying to four bet linearly, the suited ones are always going to be better because you're going to get a heads up and you're going to be able to structure. I mean, that's just a little thought that I hear a lot of people say.
Right.
Commonly,
Yeah, and I think
but
it comes from maybe that in general in my strategy, and it could be wrong and whatnot, but I think I'm a little more polar when I'm four betting instead of linear. Maybe that's a leak, but I'm definitely not four betting ace queen off every time. There's definitely folds in there too, but if I was to four bet, I guess I'm more likely to four bet the ace queen off than suited.
well, I
But yeah,
think that suited would be better. anyways, all right. So it's heads up here, and the pot is what, like just under 200, something like that, right?
yep.
Like 185 or
Yeah, about
190?
180,
Yeah.
185.
Okay. All right, let's go to the flop.
Yeah, so the flop is ace of hearts,
Mm-hmm.
ace of diamonds, king
Mm-hmm.
of hearts, and I check, and the villain bets 200.
So hero flops trip aces, right? Ace, ace, king. Hero checks and cutoff bets 200. Interesting. That because I mean it's just a little bit interesting sizing here in the sense that you aren't gonna see a whole lot of people bet ace king like when they cover the board like this, right? For 200. Maybe king king, but it's definitely a interesting sizing for sure.
Yeah, definitely don't see that sizing too often. My initial reaction was probably not ace king. King king would be interesting if he just thinks I'm never obviously going to fold an ace, so he's going for max value. But
Mm-hmm.
or you know, I
I don't think it
wasn't
makes.
entirely sure what he was thinking, but
Yeah, I mean, it's
I
just
know that it's not the
it seems
usual
like
bet.
it seems like it's a square call here, right?
Yeah, of
Yeah.
course.
So hero
Yeah,
calls ace ace
so
king.
I
Hero
called.
calls. Okay.
Yeah.
So
Turn is
now the
the
pot is
oh
like
sorry.
590. Okay. Yep.
Yep. And the turn is the 10 of hearts.
10 of hearts.
And it goes
Okay.
check check.
So front door hearts come in.
Yep.
Check check. Pot's right around 590. You guys have put in 280 and you started with 1,000. So you have about 800 or so, or no, just above 700 left in
Yeah.
your stack, like 720, something like that. That's interesting. If he had come out and bet like 500 on the turn here, what would you have done? Like a committing bet
Yeah, I don't know. Not
when the heart comes?
right.
Because when you
Yeah,
start to think
not
about like,
sure.
I mean, again, his sizing I think is a little bit out of whack, anyways. But when you start to think about a C bet range, and then the heart comes, and then he continues to bet, and he's committing himself, you're like, what did he three bet with pre? I wonder if you see some flushes. But then again, when it's the 10 of hearts, the only Broadway flush that he could have would be a royal. So would he be
Yep.
betting 500 on the turn with a royal? So, but that didn't
Yep.
happen. So it goes check, check. Okay.
Right. Yeah, so then the river is the 9 of clubs.
Okay.
And I guess first question here, and I decided to check, but I guess the first question is, should I potentially bet the river?
I think I would probably block the river to get called maybe by a weaker ace. It's just such a bizarre line to imagine somebody over betting the flop with a full house and then checking back a flush turn, or over betting the flop with a heart draw and then checking back a flush turn. Again, once in a while you run into a royal here, but I think you could probably bet like 150 here, something like that, and very sort of easily, incredibly fold, I think, to a raise. You probably have more flushes than he does. On the flip side, though, I will say, again, we keep going down the theory box. If you're always four betting ace king in a given scenario here, yes, there is a flush out there. You would probably be forced to call wider if you get raised at the river because a thinking player would know you don't have ace king. So what's the best hand that you can have? Well, could you have tens full? Are you check calling the flop with pocket tens? And maybe some flushes, something like that. But this is kind of it's a little bit bizarre. I wonder if you can get called here by maybe like a hand like ace jack, a weak sort of ace x suited type of hand that's just going to check it back as played.
Yeah, that was so my initial thought was I should block bet. And then I thought about it a little longer and thought that checking might be best. So I ended up with check, but was kind of hemming and hawing between the two in my head and decided to check. And then the villain bet 600.
Okay. Well, maybe your line of checking might be slightly better. Wow, this is a crazy, crazy hand under bluff spot because betting 600 here. It seems like a lot of people in the live chat agree with checking as opposed to block betting. My only question there is that are you checking flushes? So let's say, but again, most flush, probably the only flush that anybody has here or should have is a royal, right? Because I mean, are you calling? I mean, this is how I approach pre-flop, right? Say you made a really light open here with 5-6 of hearts or something like that, right? 6-7 of hearts. You really shouldn't call with a guy in between. Like, you can defend that heads up to a 3-bet, but that's definitely a negative EV spot to call. It's really a 4-bet or fold, lean mostly towards fold. Because taking that hand and calling with it and then being out of position to two people, we just talked about, it's almost impossible to realize, right? So what suited hand would you ever have here calling a 3-bet pre-flop? Well, the suited broadways, right? Maybe. Well, the only suited Broadway that's left is Queen Jack of Hearts, right? On Ace, Ace, King 10. There's no more suited Broadways. You could have like Queen Jack of another suit, right? Like Queen Jack of Diamonds or something like that. The question is, are you calling to a $200 bet on the flop? Because his sizing is so odd on the flop. I'm not sure off the top of my head what gets I mean, would you check call with Queen Jack of Diamonds to 200 on the flop?
Probably not.
So then you're sort of left with like, you can't really have a flush unless it's a royal. So it's just like, then I guess you're sort of checking everything. It seems like a very underbluff spot. It's kind of out of whack because of the sizing that was used. You are blocking a full house, right? Which is what your opponent is representing here with Ace King, right? You're blocking Ace King, and it seems unlikely that King King would take this line. So there's that. But on the flip side, it's like, he could have a royal. He could definitely have a royal here. That would make sense if he 3-bets in that manner, or he's just off the rails. I don't know. I would say it's an underbluff spot. Traditionally, it's a very underbluff spot, and I would sort of go back toward the fact that you check call 200 on the flop, and it seems like at a minimum you have an ace here or a flush. To my opponent, when you check call a full pot size bet, okay, this is what I would take from this hand. I would sort of go back and look at this and think, all right, well, it was a 3-bet pre-flop. I check called an overbet on the flop of 200. What does my opponent think, or what would I think that my range would be there when I'm calling ace, ace, king? Well, it's going to be an ace or a flush draw. And the flush gets there on the turn, even though we talked about it's probably just a royal. So now at the end, I check again. Like, I almost always have at least an ace here, right? So whether it's ace 5 or ace queen or something like that. So is he betting 600 here to get me off a bluff? I mean, sometimes we can go down this road where we're giving my opponent too much credit, but that's why I would kind of consider it to be a little bit of an underbluff spot.
My initial thought was I have to call because I just under whatever I was just thinking like, okay, I have to call. I have ace queen and he could just be blasting off and yada yada. But then I thought about it longer and I thought about the combination of hands that he can have. And while I agree a lot that ace king and kings make less sense, especially ace king, like I could see kings sometimes maybe doing this because you're not blocking any aces, but I thought there was just a good possibility that he could have ace 10, he could have pocket 10s, could even sometimes have pocket 9s for the same reason they'd have pocket 10s if he's just making that kind of crazy bet. And then I thought maybe there's some like 9-8 of hearts or 8-7 of hearts that he could be 3-betting.
Another thing too, just a couple of things here from the channel. Thought T Krupta says king, queen, and diamonds, which would be like, a king that's turning their hand into a bluff. Again,
yeah,
that might be theoretically one that a solver finds here, starting to use some crazy flop sizing where you have no showdown value. This is why you wouldn't use this flop sizing when you have no showdown value after the guy calls, that you're turning that into a bluff at the end. But the times that I've literally never seen that hand, it would just be so surprising to see. And then other points out that there might be some hands that the guy has that are just total air, where he took a large sizing on the flop. Once you called, he gave up with it. But then when you checked at the end, he's like, well, I'm going to play it like I had ace king. or something like that. I would just say it's traditionally a little bit of an underbluff spot. So what
Yeah.
did you fold?
Yeah, so I ended up tank folding. Um, and someone at the table was like, "Oh, it'd be sick to show a bluff here," or whatever he said, and so the guy flips over Jack 10 of clubs for a bluff.
Jack 10 of clubs.
Yeah, got me good.
So he turned a 10 into a bluff. I guess that's kind of the same thing as King Queen of Diamonds there, T corrupta. I mean, it's in the same category, right? Except for
But
the fact that it didn't have anything on the flop, whereas King
right
Queen,
on the flop, I don't know
yeah,
that King Queen would have done that.
yeah, King Queen of
Whereas
Diamonds would be
Jack
a little
10
bit
makes more
odd,
sense.
yeah. And then he just realizes, yeah, that's definitely strange, man. That's definitely strange. And again, my gut reaction, which is a block bet. Remember, a block bet is only good if it can get called by worse. So, and it's obviously a disaster if you get induced on, but you don't want to block bet just to not face. This is a pretty good example of this, right? You don't, I think a lot of people block bet because they don't want to face a large bet. That's not why you should block
Right.
bet. Because if you're doing that, you should just check, and then you need to just evaluate pot odds, basically, given the situation.
Yep.
Where like here you check and the guy bet pot, so you're getting 2-1 or MDF 50%. But there's no point in blocking though to prevent this bet. You know what I mean? So
Agreed.
a block bet really only works if you get called by worse. So it could very well be on the surface that checking might be better, but that's a strange one though for sure.
Yeah.
But I appreciate the call. Yeah, I appreciate the call. Thank
Thanks,
you very
Bart.
much. Yep.